Howdy y'all, it's Cody from the Keepers of Nerddom. It's time to talk a little bit about why is the Fallout universe such an interesting, fascinating thing. Now, a couple things to note as we get ready to talk about this, because I just think it's important. The games are rated M for mature, they're violent, they have some language, and it's a dark apocalyptic world, and that's the intensity of it. And you see a lot of skeletons and bodies because this is a depraved, messed up world that's trying to survive after apocalypse. And the other side of this too is the show just came out, and so Fallout has become much more popular again, and it's even gotten me back to playing Fallout 3, and it's been a long time. And I would just say that I think the show, one, just be very careful in watching it, because it's definitely got some inappropriate things in it that saddens my soul that they go a little too far on showing, and I just wish they wouldn't. There's not a need for that, but unfortunately we are in this era now of online streaming where, because they can skirt around the sides of the issues of ratings and systems and whatnot, they still put ratings on it, but they can just show and do things that I don't know, it's an odd place to be in a way, and it's frustrating because I wish they would just have been a little bit not as crazy with some of the things that were depicted in the show, and just really went into the violent side because it's post-apocalyptic, and more so that, and focused on that for the content, the concept. But anyway, why is Fallout such an interesting universe, and why is it so loved, and now people are going back and playing the games? Well, Fallout is a weird, crazy Americana 1940s, 1950s music, and before that even, with odd designs of nuclear-powered cars and weapons that were futuristic but not, that had been adjusted, because some of it, like the when the nukes actually fell, is way earlier or way later in the universe than you think. This is that weird piece that always boggles my brain, that the nukes fell in October 23rd, 2077 in that just boggles my mind that it's been 2077, and you pay attention in the show, the games, and it's the idea of like the microchip didn't get developed in the same way that it would in our timeline, and so things are bigger and crazier, but yet their technology is still advanced at times and then not. And so you have computers still, but it's almost like they're still running off of this really old school idea, and still the green screens, and probably weigh 50 pounds for a desktop computer easily, just barely able to be picked up in a way because they're just so massive. So it's an interesting world that you walk in, and I hope you enjoy just some gameplay from Fallout 3. Obviously the graphics have not held up as well, but I think it's just a fascinating thing that here we are in a finally getting a Fallout show that overall did a pretty good job of honoring what came before. I wish that they would have just had somebody with the scriptures of Fallout, if you will, like the handbook of what needs to be shaped around in the timeline of things. I really think that would help even for the games, because that's a thing that's lacking at times, that there's a need in here that just for consistency's sake, and I wish they would be mindful of that. Why did I get into Fallout, though? And I think this is kind of that piece that is interesting to me. I got into it because I'd heard it's an RPG game, and then all of a sudden the reality of post-apocalyptic is very dark and mysterious, and how would you survive? And then especially if you turn the difficulty all the way up in Fallout games, you go, how will I survive? But that's a fascinating piece of the gameplay. And the other thing that people that played the games long before the show that were always fascinated about was it wasn't just a world where there were people that had gone down into bunkers when the bombs started dropping. They were actually sent down there, and it was for often, and most of them, nefarious purposes of experiments. And it really makes you wonder, like, what, like, this is still a question I think today in a way, like, what really was the purpose? Because obviously each one is like, oh, there's a purpose for this experiment to see what would happen. But we've never quite yet gotten this full picture of, is Vault Tech still somewhere still around somewhere? Like, obviously in the show, there's a piece of that that's kind of answered, and I guess it does answer that, but it doesn't necessarily give us the full picture of, like, is the president of Vault Tech alive and well 200 years later? You know, are the people at the very top able and capable of running things and have this grand plan actually to save the world? It's never seems like that's the case. Or was there something bigger and better that they actually had intended, or at least better for them in the long term? And that's a fascinating idea of what happens when private corporations even monetize the end of the world in a way. And it's a fascinating concept too, because can you monetize the end of the world? I don't know that there's an answer, because, well, if everything goes up in nuclear fire, what's left? And the answer in the Fallout universe that we've seen so far is often, you know, humanity survives on the surface, but often degrades down to very little intelligence, very violent, very mean, very terrible, right? And the vault dwellers are the opposite, that they're still highly functioning and functional if they're in a vault that actually is trying to, like, the experiment is pretty mild comparatively to the others, and they succeed and get out of the vault at some point. It's rather interesting to think about. But what else do you see? You see mutations and people that, according to, like, 1950s idea of radiation, survive nukes and become what's called a ghoul and can live potentially forever, and then eventually can go feral, but we're still not quite clear on exactly how that happens. Like, what causes that? I don't know. I don't know if there's a good answer, because the games and the shows and everything have never quite given us the full picture of what can cause a ghoul to go completely feral. There is some hints at if they have no connection with other people, they tend to go crazier faster. But again, we've had people that have been locked in fridges, and even in the show, the main ghoul that's shown is buried underground for potentially decades, but also supplied with some sort of drug that keeps him sane. It's kind of interesting. It just makes you wonder, and it's a fascinating journey of what is a ghoul. Well, it's not fully explained, but the idea behind so much of the gameplay and, like, why people love New Vegas, for example, is because it's a game that really addresses this idea of power and influence and politics over time, and really delves down into what will happen in the long term. What has happened before? What will happen? And, you know, I think New Vegas has the more in-depth story structure. I still think Fallout 3 in a lot of ways is one of my favorite games, because the DLC is just making it more interesting and crazy. But it's fun to go back to this world of insanity. And here I am playing Fallout 3 again, and you go to Megaton, and one of the early people that you meet is Moira, and she sends you out on basically almost like starter quests to get you exploring the world of Fallout 3 in downtown Washington, D.C. And I think that's another piece of it. Side note is Washington, D.C. is just, there's memorable landmarks that really make it stand out compared to the other more modern games, just because you look around and you go, that's the White House, that's the Washington Monument. These are things that are easily recognized in Americana history, right? That's just a really neat thing that really helps tie you into the scope and scale of where you are, and gives you this meaning and depth to the gameplay and concept. But whereas New Vegas has Las Vegas, right? But, you know, New Vegas, it's just not a lot at times in the area that I remember that I feel like. It's just kind of that weird piece of the puzzle. But the story itself is incredible in Fallout New Vegas. Deeper motivations, deeper political intrigue, that kind of thing. So, and then Fallout 4, the scope and scale of Fallout 4 is massive and insane, and it's like not necessarily memorable because of the monuments and the things around. It's memorable because of the factions and the epic scope and scale that they try to instill upon you, and the crafting and the settlement building. Like there are really good positive pieces about Fallout 4 as well. Yeah. And what did the show do? Well, it brought mainstream attention to this concept of Fallout being so much more than just a video game. It's truly a story that's wrapped inside of a video game, wrapped up, just in so many beautiful, wonderful layers of fascinating depth of story and not beauty, but yet in a way, reverse beauty. Not just ugliness, but yet, I think there's something special about going through those games and realizing, okay, I'm going to discover this new vault, and always the mystery of what happened here for that first time. Like what caused this vault to fall apart? What was the experiment that was being run? Anybody else remember the Gary Clone vault? That vault, oh my word. Still love that one, because it just always rings true that I'm down in the dirt in the ground in a vault, and something memorable about this simple vault that's not really much different than any other ones except for the fact of what's going on in it. Like, it's still kind of same concepts, layouts of a vault design, but all you hear so many times throughout that vault is Gary. And it was just unnerving in such a simple way that it didn't take some epic Deathclaw scenario or whatnot to just be crazy and fascinating and interesting and cool all at the same time. Fallout 3 just hit like that in different ways. It didn't have to always tell the most epic story. It was the moments that they let sit in such a great way. They just hit right. You know what I'm saying? And man, it was just always good whenever you get those moments. But Fallout, the show, we got to see power armor, we got to see ghouls, we got to see the weapons from the games and these concepts, and even extra things like Jim's limbs. Like, that was a new thing as far as I could tell, and I've looked at it. I don't believe it was in any of the games, and yet it fit perfectly in the Fallout universe. And we get to see these so many concepts of the Enclave, of what history pieces fit in, because it's based in the California area, so New Vegas plays around with this stuff as well. That the Brotherhood of Steel, that we get some concept of them, and just finally living in that world beyond having to be the one playing the game, but yet getting to enjoy and still feel like we're watching someone that comes out of the vault and is leveling up as they go and makes her speech checks and whatnot, and then has crazy epic things happen. And as the ghoul says, the rule of the wasteland is basically like nothing is ever as direct as you hope, and you will always be distracted by something. Like, something will always take you off course. I appreciate that, because that feels like every Fallout game that you go, I need to go do this mission for the main quest, and then you go, but there is a boat over there, but that does look like that might be a vault. That might be over there I don't know what that is yet, but I'm curious. And then realize you just ran into a Deathclaw nest, right? There's just so many layers of the game like that I think it truly is something special that I'm glad people are experiencing again, because of how fascinating of a concept the games are. Like, what would you really do if you came up from a vault that you were raised right, and you were raised to be proper and eloquent, and the world had fallen apart, and you're going to either try to rebuild it or tear it apart as well, what would you do?
How do you feel?
And it's such an interesting journey always that these are those things. And then New Vegas is that interesting one too, where you're not that. You're the courier. That's the interesting thing too. They decided to take a different, take on the game. That you weren't just someone that came up from the vaults, but you were someone living and running and working in the New Vegas area doing a job. I appreciate that too. That gives you an interesting perspective on difference of how you would go about things, but also New Vegas was spared in different ways than other places. And, there's a lot of story there. So, man, so many things. And also a side note, I appreciate always with the Fallout show that they would show things like the food items that you would pick up in so many of these games, Yum Yum deviled eggs and cram and just these different items, the Salisbury steak. I don't know if it was in the show, but just that idea that they had these boxes and they copied them from the games to bring them into real life and just put that as this is the stuff that is used. Like that's such a good thing to do, and to be more and more accurate with what you were portraying according to the games. And obviously the games don't always line up really, really perfectly as far as their timelines and what actually has happened, but because you do have some problems with sometimes the NCR, the Brotherhood of Steel, and like the Enclave power level wise where they're at when they're at. And I think sometimes we just have to be careful of that, because it may very well be Enclave 2.0 over here instead of just, and they call themselves the Enclave, but they're actually separated out from the other parts of the faction, and you just don't necessarily see that lived out right there. Obviously I'm trying to justify some writing issues, but at the same time it's easy justifications. I think the show sometimes though has some pretty big ones with like location of Shady Sands, and what happens to it, and then that question of Fallout New Vegas storyline. Is it messed up? We don't know entirely yet, but it's not looking super great yet. What did we not see in the Fallout show quite yet? We kind of saw RoboBrains. We saw the Assaultron.
Good hunting.
Like, we saw one. It was just not functional. Did we see Protectrons? We never saw Protectrons or the Sentry Bots. We did see the Mr. Handys or Gutsies, whichever one that was, which is fine. It doesn't matter. It's more about just the fact that we're seeing the Mr. Handy device, the robot, because I would love to see more of that, right? And obviously dog meat is a thing, and it's so funny that the creators of the show went, we have to have this. It's never the same dog in each of the games, right? It's a different dog, but that's okay. The idea was more so about there's always a dog somewhere out in the wasteland just looking for its next meal, and once it finds it and it's you, not to eat you, but to befriend you and go, hey, you might be a safe place to be. I think that's really cool. It's a really neat concept of the game and the shows. That's the beauty of Fallout, and it's a story that often you just get invested in the characters, and you as the player, and repairing things and leveling up and finding new spots, discovering that special version of the weapon that you like. And then honestly the DLCs are where often the games really shine. Fallout 3, what's really great? Well, for me it's Mothership Zeta is like epicness on a whole different scale of awesome. And then Operation Anchorage, so good. And then like the continuation of the main story, it's really neat. But then Fallout New Vegas, the big MT, that is a DLC that, wow. The casino concept was really cool or whatever, but yet the mist was terrible, so frustrating. And Fallout 4, it's funny, Fallout 4, like their big DLCs, I wasn't as much enjoying of. Like Nuka World's better than Far Harbor to me. And you guys can let me know in the comments below if you agree or not. You may not, and that's okay. I get it. But my really actually favorite ones are the mini DLCs of like more stuff to craft, and especially like the vault, build your own vault down below. Just love that. It was just cool. And really though, the Assaultron DLC that gives us customizable robot companions, absolutely loved it. You know, it was always just fun to have the robots with you. They may not have been the best companions, but it didn't matter because they were some of the most fun because you built them. You customized the robot that was following you. And the Assaultron edition in Fallout 4 is just a great addition, like a faster robot that's more military minded. Sometimes you go, why did we never see these before? You know, that's always the interesting thing when a game adds new stuff. You go, yeah, but why have we not seen these things? What happened, right? Can't remember. Can you make a RoboBrain for the Assaultron DLC companions? I think you can. So I know there's a point where you get a brain. I think you do. Anyway, it's really neat because it is a mini little quest, but it also gives you so many fascinating pieces, and then you start discovering extra things in Fallout 4 that let you customize your robot more and more in different ways, and that's just so much fun. And Fallout 4 has survival mode where you have to eat and drink and sleep, and I actually really appreciate that. It's hard, but it's fun because it really gives you the sense of, I am trying to survive in the post-apocalyptic world. So yeah, I think the Fallout show, really what it was doing was giving newcomers to this idea of Fallout a taste of, this is more than just a game. This is truly a story, and you could be a part of that story. And honestly, if you haven't ever done it, I recommend playing Fallout 1, Fallout 2. I've played through all the way with Fallout 1. I can't remember if I beat Fallout 2 or not. I don't remember. But at least I finished Fallout 1. I loved it. It was so much fun because it's Fallout, but it's just that top-down, old-school RPG strategy game, and I love that concept. But these are games that give you so much lore and interesting, crazy, weird concept of world that it like got stuck in the 40s and 50s, but it was 2077 when the nukes went off, and you finally just go, that means something was really slow about things going around and changing, but yet their technology sometimes is more advanced, but not. It's so strange and interesting, and it makes for that fun mystery of like, what is truly this universe. And now we've seen it as a show that's given us this universe is dark and bleak and tough and sad, but also heroic and courageous, and people can step up to save the world. And I think that's a cool thing. So what do you think about Fallout show? What's your favorite Fallout game and why? You know, let me know down in the comments below. This has truly been a great just journey start for a show that really has gotten more people into the bigger picture stuff of Fallout as a whole. I've been Cody from the Keepers of Nerddom. Take care, y'all, and please enjoy the rest of the Fallout 3 video. Bye.